Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's really great to have so many of you join us today for the third webcast of the Women in Technology series. The engagement and reaction from the first two webcasts have been phenomenal and really sparked some fantastic discussion. My name is Hiren Shukla. I am the founder and global leader of EY's Neurodiverse Centers of Excellence. It is a real privilege to be here today and what is lined up to be a hugely insightful and eye-opening set of questions and experiences with a fantastic panel. Today, we will be taking a closer look at neurodiversity and how can we attract more neurodivergent individuals into technology. You know, it struck me that just 22% of autistic adults are in any kind of employment in the UK. According to the Office of National Statistics, it's a similar picture in the US where 85% of autistic adults are estimated to be unemployed or underemployed. And you know, really what's more is that neurodivergent individuals, dyslexic, autistic, ADHD, dyspraxic, dyscalculic, really make up somewhere in the range of 15 to 20% of the world's population. And they often excel in creativity, complex problem solving, data analytics, pattern recognition, visualization. And you're hearing all this at the time where we need so much more of this talent in emerging technology, artificial intelligence, and blockchain, cybersecurity. This is a really relevant topic for us today. So all of this made me ask 7 years ago when I founded EY's Neurodiversity Initiative, how is it possible that we have millions of individuals around the world that are on the fringe of the workforce, yet have tremendous potential, desire to contribute, especially when agility, resiliency, creativity is needed more than ever. And so, as in our previous sessions, our intention today is not to have a policy debate. We understand that words are important. You'll hear different framings from individuals, but rather we'd love to share with you real world experience and personal views from a range of talented leaders and individuals in the field. Neurodivergent individuals play a huge role in our ever-growing technology workplace, and perhaps there is a wider opportunity to share knowledge with the industry and to support for full potential. So with this, let's kick off our first polling question, which really is, I think, level setting for us. Do you have a clear understanding of what neurodiversity is? Pretty straightforward question. And while you're answering that, I'm going to have the pleasure of introducing our four amazing panelists today. And let me start off with Paula Assis. Anna is the general manager for IBM for EMEIA. As an eminent leader and a philanthropist by heart, Paula has been involved in many humanitarian activities. She's a member of the Board of Junior Achievement Americas, an organization dedicated to inspiring and preparing young students to become entrepreneurs. And in 2021, Ana Paula joined the list of top 100 executives with the best reputation in Brazil, according to the organization Merco. Ana Paula, welcome, and great to have you today. Next, I'd love to introduce Marie-Gabrielle Formand. Marie-Gabrielle is an engineer in informatics and applied mathematics. She's worked across several domains, including software, quality, process improvement, project management, and training. Today, her role is to develop people competencies. And in 2020, Marie-Gabrielle established the Mind Network along with a group of colleagues and the Cognitive Diversity Network of Thales. It is an initiative coming from employees. I'm also very delighted to have Frank and Aline from EY's Neurodiversity Center of Excellence in Madrid join us today. And Frank, let me go ahead and introduce you here. Frank is an openly neurodivergent programmer and part of our NCOE, out of our EYFSO EMEIA wave space location in Madrid. Frank has really represented amazingly how we see neurodivergence and how that shapes building long-term value by contributing in our client engagements as a data scientist and participating in the technical tribe for our next-gen data and analytics. Frank has said that he's appreciable for receiving all the counseling and training, and he treats every day as an opportunity to create value personally and professionally in a unique way. Welcome, Frank. Last but not least is Aline Bravo. Aline is a client experience designer for EY's WaveSpace and the communication lead for our Neurodiversity Center of Excellence in Madrid. Aline is openly autistic and passionate about advocating around neurodiversity, especially in Spain and Latin America, through speaking engagements that have reached thousands of people. Aline is a firm believer that inclusion unlocks innovation potential. So as you can see, we have a powerhouse-packed panel today. I wanted to mention a few things. One, we are recording today's session. There is a survey at the end, and after today's webcast, you will receive a link with the webcast recording. So I would also love to encourage you to help us today. As you think about questions or comments, we'd love for you to put that into the chat. We have a Q&A session that's going to be coming at the end. But all of that being said, let's look really quickly at what our polling question has told us today. So let's see if we can put, here's the polling results. I see them up top. So very interesting. It's almost a third, as you can see. About a third of you all said, yes, you have a clear understanding. Almost a third, or 29.2%, said, no, you don't. And no surprise, there is a portion in between, about 37%. And I think it's really important we use today, not only for level setting, as we're talking about neurodiversity and neurodivergence, but I think more importantly, we know today from a technology perspective in the field and the industry, there is a need for talent, and there's such an amazing opportunity we have, as Aline rightfully said, innovation, inclusion really does drive innovation. So all of that being said, we're going to move into the first part of our panel discussion, and we're going to start with personal questions before moving to organizational roles. You know, it's important that you hear the personal experiences from our panelists as they've moved through this and actually had lived experiences. And with that, on question one, Aline, I'd love to start with you. Aline, what do you want others to be aware of to break down maybe some of the stigma or perceptions around neurodiversity? And let me just ask you, as a neurodivergent individual, do you believe there's enough awareness out there on the topic? And if any thoughts on what can improve this? So, Aline.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is a wonderful opportunity for neurodiversity. As an autistic woman, it's hard finding representation, and it's not the media's fault per se. I don't think there's anyone at fault, but the representation they have of us is a very specific one. If you think of autism or any autistic character, I'm pretty sure everyone's going to come up with Sheldon, or they're going to talk about Rain Man, the movie. And that doesn't encompass all of us. We are so very different. We all have various different traits and an infinite amount of characteristics that compose us all. So it's very hard to find one poster child for autism or for ADHD or for, dyslexia, dyscalculia. So it's hard to face the world when they expect something very specific of you, a white male that is really centered on STEM. So there's never anyone like me. And there's plenty of neurodivergents just like me that are, very talkative, have different traits. So that doesn't help. And when you come into a workplace environment, no one knows what to expect from you. So it's kind of hard to find a way there. And awareness, there's not enough. It really varies by country. The US and UK and Australia, Canada, they really do lead the way. The neurodivergent movement is huge, especially because we get our voices heard there. And in Latin America, why I push so much for Latin American in Spain and to have content in Spanish is because they've never heard from us. The only people talking about neurodiversity in Spain are associations or therapists or parents, but never us. So having a voice, I think it's super important just for showing, not for pushing anything. I'm not an advocate for just pushing through and barreling over people, but just kind of letting people know that, hey, we're here, we exist, we have opinions and voices, and you can consider us when asking questions or, hearing our opinion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Aline. And the differences of understanding is today's opportunity, right? Why are we doing today's webcast is to help maybe drive awareness, education, but also to drive engagement in this topic. So thank you, Aline, for that. Marie-Gabrielle, let's move to you for the second question. Clearly, you are a driving force in this topic and across a fantastic career that you continue to contribute in. Could you share a personal story with us today?
Yes, thank you. So on my side, I discovered quite late, I was 48, when I discovered that I am a gifted and a highly sensitive person. And after accepting that, I was wondering, what can I do? How can I help others to discover their differences? How can I help people to understand what it is about? A first cognitive diversity network had been created in Airbus in 2016. I have met their founders, Céline Tovar and Christian Charlier, who have talked on various places about that, to understand how they did and to be able to do the same in my company. Today, we are many cognitive diversity networks coming from employees, because many companies do not take the lead on including neurodiverse individuals, or they only see the dark side or the problems or the deficiencies. But first, not all aspects of neurodiversity are problems. Highly sensitive persons, they feel differently, but it's not an handicap. Giftedness is not a problem either. So in 2020, with a group of colleagues spread in several entities of the group, we have launched Mind with the objective to promote cognitive diversity in the group for the benefit of each other, not only for neurodivergent people, because we need to be understood and we need to do half of the way if we want to be understood. And we think we can bring to the company more performance because of our specific skills. But for that, we need to help our colleagues, our manager, our HR to better understand the value we can bring.
Yeah, Marie-Gabrielle, thank you so much. And, you hit on such an interesting and important topic of reframing neurodiversity from what often is defaultly seen from a deficits-based perspective to a strengths-based model.
Absolutely.
And that's an education journey to get there. And that very nicely gets me to the third question with Frank. And Frank, I think when I look at your career and how well you've propelled yourself on how neurodivergence can actually be the biggest strength and how it has uniquely used it in the arena of technology and problem solving. Frank, can I ask if you could provide a real life example on how either how technology has helped you or rather how it helps us improve neurodiversity inclusiveness? Frank.
Thank you, Hiren. I'm going to tell you about a 13 years old boy that in the school was not integrated. Some of his classmates play music, other plays football, and he's very bad at everything that help including in society. But he takes a old computer, a Pentium 4, install Linux on a pen drive, repair it, and starting programming in Bash and GNU C compiler. And I was in my room programming and doing math exercise about sequences in loops, nesting, and later in my career, and those skills have been very useful to know be integrated in society. And for in the corporations is extremely useful.
Yeah, thank you on that, Frank. And I think your journey, Frank, has really shown a lot of what maybe Gabrielle was just talking about from a standpoint of strengths, but it really aligns to your interest. And the interest maybe is, for some people it's in football, but in other people it's in programming or coding or data or creativity. And I will state, which I didn't up front, while today's discussion is women in technology and how to attract neurodiverse talent into technology, we know that neurodivergent individuals can do any job. In fact, they already do. And so I just wanted to state that. Frank, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today. Let me move to Anna. Thank you. Let me move to Anna Paula. Anna Paula, you have been consistently recognized for the fantastic work and the change that you've led across the globe. I'm curious, what do you believe from a standpoint of, is there enough social awareness on this topic? Have you seen differences in geographies? You've moved between Brazil and Spain, and I hope you're getting settled in for that. How do you think people can improve on awareness and understanding?
So thank you for the opportunity to be here and discussing such an important topic. Listen, I think it's a reality that regardless of the place, there is still a lot to be understood and learned when it comes to neurodiversity. I think we're really scratching the surface on it. And when I look at, specifically the reality of IBM, this is a journey that started back in 2015 when there was a celebration of the Autistic Day by the United Nations, and that raised a lot of awareness to us in what we needed to do in order to tap into the amount of fantastic and vast talent that you can find in this group, right? So that journey began with first identifying allies, about 200 people that volunteered to be part of creating a community that would support these individuals. Then we ended up in 2017 hiring 6 or 7 neurodiverse professionals to start a pilot, and today we are talking about more than almost actually 400 people across all IBM in the world that are in the neurodivergent community. So what we learned so far is that, first of all, not necessarily easy to identify, right? Because these are very, let's say, characteristics that are not necessarily visible in the first place. So I was today here I'm actually today in Hursley, which is one of our largest labs for development in the world and here in UK. And of course, we have an important community of neurodivergent people here. And we came up with this ribbon where you can use to say that you have, some sort of a disability or you're neurodivergent and you cannot be recognized so easily. So I think that level of making it very visible, making it the environment welcoming and comfortable is what's going to allow us to raise the awareness, raise the need of understanding better how these people can really contribute to create significant and very innovative work. And I'm very excited to continue the conversation here on this topic.
Wonderful. Ana Paula, thank you so much. And I really appreciate how you have described this as a journey, moving from awareness to education to engagement with the broader community, and then implementation. Because if there's not change at the end of the day, then we've just had a great conversation, right? And spoken about this. So I think that there is tremendous opportunity today in terms of what we can do here. So, Ana Paula, thank you. Let's transition now to an organizational focus. For our audience, you have heard from our participants from a personal perspective and their own lived experience in different aspects, whether it's as a neurodivergent individual, as a champion, as an ally, as an advocate. And as we transition, let's go to the next polling question. I think that it will be important I'm sorry, excuse me. Let me pause for, we'll do this and then we'll go to Q&A after this. So is your organization actively engaged in the topic of neurodiversity? So you could help answer that question. And let's take some Q&A right now. And we've got some great questions coming in. I encourage our audience, keep sending them in, and we'll go from there. So, Marie-Gabrielle, I have one of the questions that has come in that I think you can probably help. And the question is, how should you deal with someone, how should you work with someone who reports to you that maybe you think they're neurodivergent? They haven't come out, they haven't disclosed their status. And so I'm curious, Marie-Gabrielle, if you have any thoughts on this.
Yes, first, I think it's not so easy for somebody to disclose their status because they don't know how they are going to be welcomed or not. They don't know what kind of stereotype they are going to be allocated. So most of the time, people don't talk about it. Second, I say you don't need to ask the person whether he is or she is neurodivergent or not. You can start discussing about specific needs. You can discuss about what kind of job, of work, what kind of value that person would like to bring. You can try to take the benefits, the value, the special skills of that person, and at the same time, listen to the needs. I take an example. Open spaces are awful for many of us because they are noisy, because there are lots of smells, lots of lights, and so on. So maybe giving an opportunity to have a better place to work or giving more time to work from home could be an opportunity. So you don't need to ask to the person whether she or he is neurodivergent or not. You can ask about benefits and needs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marie-Gabrielle. And I so appreciate your perspective here because I think many individuals, neurotypicals like myself, when we first enter this conversation, we don't know what to say. And, Aline said something great, we're thinking what we've seen in TV and movies. That's not necessarily reality of what's there. So thank you, Marie-Gabrielle. Aline, do you have any comments or anything you'd like to add to this question?
I'd love to. I agree with everything you've said, Marie-Gabrielle. And I also think that maybe these conversations like we're doing right now helps a lot. A lot of neurodivergents are so scared of coming out. That was my case as well. And I was so afraid that maybe if I came out, my job would be in danger. People would look at me differently. They would start to treat me differently. And I don't require that. Maybe just a little bit more understanding. So people knowing that we are welcoming to neurodiversity will really help them come out and seek help.
Thank you. Yeah, Aline, the kind of starting the conversation and making it okay to say, I actually want to talk about something. And Marie Gabrielle is right. It's not, do you have a diagnosis? It's, what do you need to be successful, and how do we help? And frankly, we would do that for anybody, whether you're neurodivergent or not, right? So, Aline, while I have you, let me ask you the next question that came in, which I think is a very interesting, but one that many individuals have. Why are there more neurodivergent men than neurodivergent women in employment? Any perspective, Aline, on that?
Oh, yeah. Well, we are kind of wired differently. So a lot of women are underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. We don't present exactly the same symptoms or behaviors as our male counterparts do, because we've just simply been wired different. So we sometimes can socialize a lot better, and we express our anxiety differently. So a lot of us just simply have a diagnosis of general anxiety or bipolar disorder or even borderline personality disorder, when in reality it's actually just ADHD or autism, and they've never caught it because as a young girl, we don't present the same behaviors. The autism diagnosis, DSM-5, is basically based on a group of young boys. So when they just developed these guidelines for diagnosing, they didn't include girls. One of the biggest things was the speech, how well you can relate, if you can make eye contact. And a lot of us can make eye contact. It's just a little bit uncomfortable, but we can make it. So if you make eye contact, oh no, you're not autistic, don't worry about it. And they don't address the rest of the issues, especially with executive dysfunction. So that's one of the reasons. Just misdiagnosis, and now speaking about it, I hope it helps a lot of more women come out and find help.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting visual phenomenon that we can all see. And why are there so many? We don't, to your point, there isn't one profile. And, as I've learned from the community, if you've met one neurodivergent person, well, that means you just met one, and they're all very different. And I think appreciating and understanding those differences, there isn't a stereotypical approach, and which is, I think, something that, as Anna Paula talked about in Allies, we can all learn this, and I think we can apply this in day-to-day. So I think there is a couple of more questions that are here. I'm trying to follow the chat as we move along, and I'll put it out and see if there's anybody that that wants to cover this one. And it says, what's the single most important thing an ally can do to support our neurodivergent colleagues? So I'll repeat the question. What's the single most important thing that we think an ally can do to support our neurodivergent colleagues? Anna Paula, maybe I'll start with you, since you brought up the term ally, and see if you have any thoughts here.
Absolutely. So I think that the first and probably the most important thing that an ally can do is to bring awareness, especially in the workplace, right? So for people to be attentive and to be absolutely involved in the process. So an example here, right? As I mentioned to you, we have I was fortunate enough to be in one of our most prominent places in terms of adapting itself to the neurodivergent professionals. And they were explaining to me that there was one person that started to feel extremely anxious about the change that was going to be happening in our offices here, as there was comments here before, Marie was saying, right, about how open spaces with a lot of light, noise, can eventually create a lot of anxiety. And when he heard that these changes were going to be implemented, he was becoming extremely anxious, and he was actually losing his sleep because he was worried about how the new environment would impact his ability to perform. So he mentioned that to one ally, and that ally brought him to the design process of the space that we were creating, right? So I actually visited the area. It's really a very different, almost no colors. The lighting is appropriate. You have a more individualized cubicles and not so open space as the other parts of the building. So I think an ally is an advocate, right? An ally is someone that will make sure that the voices of these professionals are heard and that we make the necessary changes to adapt the environment for them to perform at their best.
Wow, that is fantastic. Thank you. And I know that Marie-Gabrielle has put it to the post that an ally can really be an amazing intermediate between our neurodivergent colleagues and our neurotypical colleagues that may not understand. And, you know, it's interesting, Ana Paula, that a lot of those changes, lighting, sound, funny enough, even as a neurotypical, I think, what is my best work environment? And so there's so much tremendous universal design and application to what we're talking about. I'm going to move to the results of the polling question first. I know more questions are coming in, so we're going to put another Q&A section at the end. So ask the participants, keep sending your questions in. This is amazing, and we love answering them. So here are the results of the polling question. Is your organization actively involved on the topic of neurodiversity? And funny enough, we get the same distribution that we had before. A third yes, about a third no, and a third partially. And I think this, again, is highly representative of the opportunity that we have in the world, value creation, and as I'm going to use my friend Aline's thoughts at the beginning, how inclusion, particularly from a technology perspective, is key to driving innovation, because you want creativity to rise to the surface. The divergence of thinking is what we want from everybody. So there's tremendous opportunity to move forward. So let's move to the second part of our panel discussion. Now is the organizational side of it. Marie-Gabrielle, I'd love to start with a question for you. And I know you have been actively driving neurodiversity, the neurodiversity message in the world. It would be great to get your perspective on why is this important, what benefits does this drive, and maybe a view on what organizations can do better to engage neurodivergent individuals that frankly already work for them. Marie-Gabrielle.
Thank you. We have seen from the start of this webinar that people with cognitive diversity differences, it's mainly a perspective of brain. The brain is structured differently and it's functioning differently, and this can be seen through imagery. So they are going to have specific abilities. They can have a huge memory. They can be solving problems quicker than others. They can see differences, small differences, very, very quickly. So they are bringing capabilities which are sharper than what another person can do, or who comes quicker than another person. So it makes a big difference. But sometimes they are not listened to. They see the problem, they see the difficulty, they see the error, but they go too fast. And it seems impossible to others to have so quickly the right answer or so quickly to see the problem, so they are not listened to. So they need to find a way to make themselves understood while they are right, but nobody has seen that. And sometimes it can take half an hour, a week for people to discover what the neurodivergent person has seen at once. So it's all about building trust and understanding we are functioning in a different way, and that we need to work together, because the strengths of some are the weaknesses of others. And all together, we can bring much more value.
Yeah, Mary Gabrielle, I really love the way that you have painted this picture. We know that innovation, value creation around transformation efforts, emerging technology is a team effort. It is not an individual effort. And on a team, we all bring different parts of it. And to the extent and opportunity that organizations can accentuate and amplify that value, you now have the best of all different parts of individuals, neurodivergent, neurotypical. You now create the beautiful tapestry around neurodiversity. Paula, this really brings a great question to you, and clearly coming from IBM, you have a good, really strong perspective on why is neurodiversity important in the technology industry? Paula, can I ask you to talk about this?
I don't think it's just the technology industry. I think it's across all industries. We are all looking for great talent, right? Talent has become and is becoming more and more a scarce resource for companies. So we want to make sure that we bring the best. And what we have learned is that many of the neurodivergent people, they have fantastic curriculum. They have, most cases, master degrees, PhDs, and it's absolutely absurd, right, that we do not tap into that type of quality of talent because of biases or any other aspects that don't necessarily have anything to do with the ability of them to deliver value, to bring innovation, to create new technologies, and to, as you said, to bring a very different perspective to how we do things. Aline was with IBM, right, with us until last year when she joined EMEIA. She actually led the business resource group for Spain on neurodivergent teams. So I think she knows a little bit how we've been working on this topic. But to me, we have so much fantastic contribution that is coming from this group in developing new technologies, supporting us in our own internal systems. And when you create really the proper environment and you design the work in a way that they can contribute, all we can see is that fantastic results can be achieved from that.
Yeah, boy, Paula, it's such a important business imperative today. This is no longer a conversation that we're having around corporate social responsibility, or it's just the right thing to do, or it's the nice thing to do. This is an imperative on talent. And as I'm listening to you all and what Frank has spoken about his own journey, and frankly, the work that he does and his colleagues, we see the tremendous opportunity and value. And so, we'll talk a little bit further, because we want to dive into what actually can employers do to do twofold. One, you already have a neurodivergent employee workforce. Acknowledging them, recognizing, supporting them, creating platforms where Aline has talked about giving them a voice, because we want people's voices and differences to come out. We don't want to just converge and harmonize. I think the second part is attracting more individuals into the tech industry and into companies. Paula, very quickly, do you have any thoughts in terms of attracting what employers can do or what changes they can make?
Yeah, I think the first element is that you work with partners and companies that can advise you properly on how to do, because this is new territory, and you have to make sure that you do this right? So we partner with especially Stern, for example, that process started in Europe and then expanded to other countries, where they really helped us identify and properly, screen the candidates in a way that is unbiased, that you're really looking for the skills, the capabilities, and with that, really attracting the right candidates that we needed to do the jobs, to perform the jobs. So I think that's point number one. The second is, as I said, that you really create a work environment and you educate the managers, the colleagues, the collaborators of how it is that you have to work, right, or create the conditions for these people to feel welcomed, to feel supported, to feel safe, right? And finally, I think one other aspect that normally we forget, right, or don't put so much on the forefront is that there are, in many situations, parents of neurodivergence, right, that have to provide a completely different care to their children while working for the company. So I think that expanding that not only to support the neurodivergence that you have working for you, but also the parents and family members of families that have neurodivergence has to be also part of your agenda around supporting this whole ecosystem.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And so many layers and levels. And, Aline, if I can come to you for a second, because while we talk about changes and things at the organizational level, I think many of the participants on today's webcast are thinking at the individual level. What can I do? And maybe, Aline, could you share some examples maybe of miscommunication or things that sort of help our audience understand the impact? So what is happening on the individual level?
Sure. But first of all, just thank you, Paula. Yes, I was former ABM, and I would have never been able to come out if there wasn't the support where I felt free to come out and talk about this. And it's given me so many opportunities, and, I'm super thankful for that. And when it comes to communication and an individual level, what happens is we have a different type of communication. So maybe just having an open mind and understanding that sometimes when we ask questions, we're not defying anything. We just really need a lot of information in order to complete these tasks. I don't want to, in front of my former employee and current employer, say I have cognitive and dysfunctions with my executive functioning, but it's true. I do require a lot of information in order to complete a task. I can't just abstract and say, I'm just going to go do the dishes, or I will just fill this report. I need to know, why am I doing this report, why it happens? So understanding that maybe this happens and that we need to ask questions is a thing, and keeping our mind open. We are a multinational company. We are working worldwide and globally. If we can accept someone learning English and making mistakes and having different culture and making cultural faux pas, we could also open our minds a little bit to neurodivergence learning, social language, which is one of our key deficits, is, messing up. I will tell you, the first time I was actually working in eBay, and they asked me, do you want to have a coffee? Let's have a virtual coffee over this. And I was like, wait, a coffee? But I don't want to drink coffee at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Why would I have a coffee right now? And I didn't realize that I didn't have to have a coffee. It was just a chat. So, small anecdotes like that are always happening, but they can also scale to bigger things. So just keeping an open mind, I think it's imperative in an individual level. And, try to understand that if I'm asking a lot of stuff, it's not to question anything. I just need that information to function.
Yeah, thank you, Aline. It's so refreshing to hear you talk about this, because what has often been seen as slow, inaccurate corporate communication, where it's an unspoken word, and frankly, many people, neurotypicals included, don't really understand what's happening. It is often the neurodivergent team member that will ask the question that everyone is thinking about, to drive clarity and speed and velocity into our business. And I would say driving velocity and accelerating solution development if there's anyone on the in this webcast that thinks that those things are not so important today, I don't know how else we would miss that opportunity. So thank you, Aline, for that. We're going to come back because I definitely want to make sure that we get Frank's input and others. We've got some great questions. And so let me start with the first one. Marie Gabriel, I think it's a question, and there are two questions that came in. We're going to put them together because I think you're in a good place to answer this. The question is, Marie Gabriel, have you ever heard, seen anyone experienced or felt that they are a threat to their neurotypical colleagues, maybe because of how their abilities are perceived to be? And part of this, I think, connects into, is there a personal experience or something you can share around unmasking? And I'll define unmasking for those on the webcast. Often means it's coming out. It's actually stating, here is, here's who I am and here's what I need. So Marie Gabriel, can I ask you to talk about this?
Yes, thank you. So first about the threat. Yes, you can be perceived as a threat. First, because you go faster, and second, because you see things others don't see. And most of the time, because you have a lot of topics of interest, you are able to talk of many, many different things. And you can be perceived as knowing it all. You may be perceived as being proud. And in fact, you are just wishing to share what you know. You are just trying to avoid others from making mistakes. And from my knowledge, at least for people with we are gifted, they are often considered as proud, and most of them, they don't feel proud at all. In fact, they feel, I think you had a webinar about the syndrome of, I can catch the word now. This syndrome where you feel you are not capable. And most of the time it is our case. The second people who can feel threatened by us is managers. Because when you do too much, when you go too fast, when you see things that they don't see, they can feel that you want their place. Yes, the imposter syndrome, yes. They can feel that you want to take their role, you want to take their place. And it's not the case. You are just trying to do your job the best as you can. So about coming out now, when I have started the network, I have shared that with the colleague of my teams and my manager. And I have explained to my manager why I was different, in which I was different, and to my colleagues. And one of the most difficult feedback I have got is, if you are more than we are, then you need to adapt to us. We can do anything. I don't know if you see how rude it is to say that to somebody. So it's very difficult to get out. But by launching a network, I needed to do it, and I'm happy to have done it. But yes, you are perceived as a threat, and yes, people are not ready to listen to that.
Yeah, thank you, Marie Gabriel. I think about Anna Paula's description before of the journey at IBM, and I'll share in a little bit our journey a bit at EY. But as I listen to you, I think about the opportunity and the need for safety, for psychological safety, meaning when we say, and you hear this term often, bring your whole self to work. Well, bringing your whole self to work really means all parts of you, and appreciating, not just accepting or tolerating, but appreciating, accentuating, and amplifying those unique differences. This is where I think organizations and the opportunity, particularly in the technology industry, as we're talking about today, what an amazing opportunity to unlock value that you already have available to you. So thank you, Marie Gabrielle, for your views and your own personal comments on that. We did have a question that has come in that I'm going to answer, and it was, would you recommend a team of neurodivergents? And what lessons have been learned or tips that EY can share about creating a neurodiversity hub that maybe other organizations can learn from? And I will chime in here, and maybe my friend Aline can help me on this as well. So let me start off. First of all, EY's Neurodiverse Centers of Excellence does not mean that we are putting our team members in any sort of a silo, a bubble. Effectively, it means we've created a process, an entry point that will accommodate the differences that individuals have in an interview process. And we have heard from hundreds, if not thousands, of neurodivergent team members that said, I've gone to 500 interviews and I don't feel comfortable making eye contact. And I always get the first interview because I have a very great, strong resume, but I don't get the second interview. And so when we think about the hubs that we've created, we're only creating a hub that allows for a accommodated entry point into the firm, but two, it starts to create that foundation for psychological safety. It's a manager that understands you. It's the support systems you need. And as Marie Gabrielle had said before, and Ana Paula was talking about an ally, we've effectively created a bridge to say, how do we integrate, amplify, and celebrate the differences that we have at EY or IBM or any other thing? So it is not a team of neurodivergents. I should be clear on that. And frankly, we do not recommend this. I think an integrated model that has fair opportunity, career progression, growth, exposure, and a voice. And that voice of hearing from colleagues who think differently is extremely valuable in today's age of emerging technology and data. And so one of the things that we recommend, and when I speak to companies around the world, we really talk to them about, if you're looking to launch any initiative around neurodiversity, why are you doing this? What is your why? And if we can define that why, and we can build this into a sustainable and scalable business model, now you have actually done something with the reputational capital that IBM, EY, others have in the world. We have tremendous capital to make difference. And Aline, I'll pause and see if you have any thoughts that you'd like to add into this question.
Yeah, it was my first experience actually being hired as an autistic person. I never talked about it. All my other interviews and all my other onboarding was so different because I had to mask everything I do. I am comfortable with eye contact, but not always. I move a lot. I have a lot of gestures. So I'm not always seen as the most optimal person to be in a team where HR doesn't see me as a valuable candidate. But knowing that I was autistic, it was so welcoming. I was never afraid that I wouldn't get a job or, not be accepted. And then with the onboarding experience, having everyone know what's happening, having the teams and having just the colleagues know what neurodiversity is helps a lot. So I think that's super important when you come in and you already have this basis of, a culture that understands what's happening, because, it's great to not have to be afraid and mask and have to worry if I say something wrong or did I mess up? Did I say something inappropriate? Or it's just nice. It's very comforting and it helps you succeed and adapt better.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And again, I would say, who doesn't want that? Whether you're neurodiverse or neurotypical, everybody wants to have that feeling of safety. Let's move as we get right to the end. I'm going to go to each panelist because I think it's so important that we hear your top tip. How do we drive a more inclusive culture and better opportunities for our neurodivergent colleagues and the talent pool. And so we'll do a little bit of a rapid movement. Marie-Gabrielle, can we start with you first, and then we'll move to the rest of the panel?
Yes. I would say accept people as they are. Include them with their strengths and their weaknesses, and they will give their best.
Beautiful. Thank you for summarizing that. Paula, if I can go to you next, your top tip to drive a more inclusive culture.
I think really create an environment where people feel safe. Psychological safety has to be part of the culture. That applies to any individual, in my point of view. And specifically here, a very practical aspect on neurodiversity is really finding and matching the employee with how they can excel in activities that require, their focus, that bring creativity as part and thinking different as part of the role, and be prepared for some, very, very blunt, candid comments and excessive transparency that sometimes can be even comical, but that's that understanding that this is how the behavior happens. Be open for that.
Thank you so much, Ana Paula. Frank, we are extremely lucky to have you and your own personal lived experience today. What would you say is the biggest difference for you that our audience can learn from?
The things that say my teammates and that we do in the things to promote inclusive, it is not only for being inclusive, to be solidated, it makes make money to the and gets value to the society, to the firm, to the clients. It's if you invest into inclusiveness, it is not only for being inclusive. It also gives a long-term value and money to the partners and to every member of the society.
How beautifully said, Frank. And thank you for reminding everybody the importance and the value opportunity that we know companies have today. Frank, thank you so much for today. Aline, last but definitely not least, you are a bold voice in advocacy around neurodiversity. What would you like to leave our audience with today?
All I was going to leave with, sorry, Portuguese came in my head, is exactly this, what we're doing, joining forces, having IBM and EY together, collaborate and talk about this, show that we are open and just simply say, here, this exists. We're neurodivergence. It happens. It's not a big deal. We can talk about this. We can include them because we're at different levels, worldwide. But this, exactly what we're doing, is already a huge start.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Aline. This is hopefully the start of a conversation for many. And I know we're at the end of time. I first of all want to thank our panel, Marie-Gabrielle and Paula, Frank, Aline, thank you so much. And hopefully we have intrigued many individuals today to continue the conversation. There is a feedback form that will come after this. And so we would love to make sure that you take a few moments and provide that back. And I would say, last but not least, please reach out to us. We really want to continue this conversation, and we want to make sure that you get a firsthand experience. I know from Aline and my standpoint, and Frank from EY, and from, I'm sure, Ana Paula and Marie-Gabrielle, we're really happy to make sure that we coordinate and talk to you more. So thank you for spending time with us today. And with that, have a great rest of your evening and the rest of your day.